At exactly 11 p.m., someone knocked on my apartment door 3 times. I almost ignored it. Then I heard a trembling voice from the other side say my name, and every bit of sleep disappeared from my body. It was my ex-girlfriend's mother, Margaret. She was standing in the hallway with a small suitcase, wet hair, and tears running down her face. The woman who had once welcomed me into her family now looked like she had nowhere left in the world to go. When I opened the door, she looked at me and whispered, "I have nowhere else to go." I had no idea that opening that door would change both of our lives forever. Before I continue, if you believe people deserve kindness, forgiveness, and second chances even after life has broken them, please take a moment to like this video, share it with someone who needs hope, leave a comment, and subscribe to the channel. Sometimes one small act of kindness can become the beginning of an entirely different life. My name is Nathan, and I lived alone in a small apartment outside Columbus, Ohio. 2 years earlier, I had been engaged to Margaret's daughter, Claire. We had been together for almost 4 years, and I honestly believed she was the person I would grow old with. Margaret had always treated me like a son. She remembered my birthday, called when I was sick, and used to save a place for me at Sunday dinner. But everything changed when Claire left me for another man. The breakup was painful enough, but what hurt even more was how quickly the entire family disappeared from my life. I understood why Claire walked away, but losing Margaret felt like losing a second mother. For nearly 2 years, I heard nothing from her. I never asked mutual friends about her, because I had convinced myself that the past needed to stay buried. I worked long hours at a construction company, came home exhausted, cooked simple meals, and tried to build a life that didn't depend on anyone else. I thought I had finally learned how to live with loneliness. Then Margaret appeared at my door. She looked completely different from the woman I remembered. Her coat was thin, her hands were shaking, and there was a bruise near her wrist. I immediately stepped aside and let her in. She placed her suitcase near the wall and sat down as though her legs could no longer carry her. I brought her water and a blanket, but she barely touched either. After several minutes, she finally told me what had happened. Claire had married the man she left me for. At first, Margaret said, she believed her daughter was happy. But over time, the marriage became controlling and frightening. Claire had eventually moved away, taking her children with her, but Margaret stayed behind because she had nowhere to go. Then her husband died unexpectedly, leaving behind debts she couldn't manage. She lost her house after falling behind on payments, and the relatives she thought would help told her they couldn't take her in. She had spent that evening sitting at a bus station, staring at her phone and wondering who she could call. There was only one number she still remembered by heart. Mine. I didn't know what to say. Part of me wanted to ask why she hadn't called Claire. Another part of me was angry that after 2 years of silence, she had come to me. But when I looked at her face, I didn't see my ex-girlfriend's mother anymore. I saw an exhausted woman who had lost her home, her security, and almost her hope. So I told her she could stay. The next few weeks were difficult. Margaret was ashamed of needing help, and I was still carrying old wounds from my relationship with Claire. Sometimes we ate dinner without speaking. Other nights, she would sit by the window and stare outside for hours. One evening, I found her crying quietly at the kitchen table. She admitted that she blamed herself for not recognizing what Claire's marriage had become sooner. I told her she couldn't spend the rest of her life punishing herself for things she couldn't control. Slowly, something changed between us. Margaret started helping me cook. I repaired a broken shelf in the apartment, and she laughed when I nearly dropped the entire thing on my foot. We began taking evening walks through the neighborhood. She found a part-time job at a local community center, and I helped her search for a small apartment she could afford. Then, one Saturday morning, my phone rang. It was Claire. I hadn't heard her voice in 2 years. She told me her mother had contacted her. She knew Margaret was staying with me, and she wanted to come to Ohio. My heart tightened immediately. I didn't know whether I was ready to see the woman who had broken my heart. When Claire finally arrived, she stood outside my apartment with tears in her eyes. She apologized, not for leaving me, but for disappearing from my life and allowing her mother to believe she had no one. She told me her own life had fallen apart too, and she had spent years trying to rebuild herself after leaving a toxic marriage. I expected anger to return. Instead, I felt tired. Not weak. Not defeated. Just tired of carrying a past that no longer belonged to me. Margaret eventually moved into her own small apartment. Claire began visiting her regularly, and the three of us slowly found a strange kind of peace. I never got back together with Claire, and neither of us wanted that anymore. Some relationships are meant to become marriages, while others are meant to teach us how to forgive. Months later, Margaret handed me a small envelope. Inside was a handwritten note thanking me for opening my door that night. She wrote that when she knocked at 11 p.m., she believed she was asking for a place to sleep. Instead, she found something she had almost forgotten existed, a home where she wasn't judged for falling apart. If this story touched your heart, please like the video, share it, and subscribe. Your support helps these stories reach people who may need a little hope when they feel completely alone. And before the story ends, I want you to comment one word: kindness. Because you never know how much one small act can mean to someone standing on the other side of a door. That night taught me something I'll never forget. Sometimes the people who arrive at our door carrying their broken pieces aren't there to reopen our old wounds. Sometimes they're there to remind us that forgiveness doesn't erase the past, it simply stops the past from controlling our future. And sometimes, at 11 p.m., when you think someone is asking you for a place to stay, life is actually asking you whether you still have room in your heart for compassion.